On the bustling intergalactic medical station Nebula 7, Nurse Lyra, a Zephyrian with shimmering blue skin and delicate antennae, hurried through the corridors. The station was a melting pot of species from across the galaxy, but humans were still a relative novelty. As she entered the trauma ward, her supervisor, Dr. Vex, a towering Andromedian with 4 arms, beckoned her over. "Lyra, we have a new patient. Human male, unconscious. Took a nasty hit during a space debris incident. He's stable, but I need you to monitor him closely," Dr. Vex instructed, handing her a data pad. Lyra nodded, her antennae twitching with curiosity. She'd never treated a human before, and the prospect both excited and nervous her. As she approached the bed, she couldn't help but marvel at the patient's exotic features. His skin was a warm tan, so different from her own cool blue hue. Dark hair crowned his head, and a layer of stubble covered his strong jaw. The datapad identified him as Ethan Reeves, a human engineer working on an asteroid mining operation. Lyra began her examination, her trained eyes scanning for any signs of distress. His vitals were stable, but she noticed some bruising on his torso. "I should clean him up and check for any hidden injuries," Lyra murmured to herself. She gathered supplies for a sponge bath, her movements efficient and professional. As she gently washed Ethan's arms and chest, she couldn't help but admire the alien musculature. Humans were so different from Zephyrians, with their solid forms and warm skin. Moving lower, Lyra continued her ministrations, lost in thought about the fascinating differences between their species. Suddenly, she noticed something alarming between Ethan's legs. A swelling was rapidly forming, growing larger by the second. Lyra's eyes widened in shock, her antennae standing straight up in alarm. "By the cosmic winds," she gasped, stumbling backward. In all her medical training, she'd never encountered anything like this. Was it some kind of defense mechanism? An allergic reaction? Or worse, a sign of a critical internal injury? Panic seized her as she fumbled for the emergency call button. "Dr. Vex," she cried out. "Come quickly. The human patient is experiencing a severe and unexplained swelling." Dr. Vex rushed in, all 4 arms at the ready. "What's the situation, Nurse Lyra?" Lyra pointed trembling fingers at Ethan's lower body. "There. It just started growing suddenly. I've never seen anything like it. Could it be some kind of parasitic infection? Or maybe a reaction to our atmosphere?" Dr. Vex leaned in to examine the patient, his multiple eyes blinking rapidly. After a moment, to Lyra's utter bewilderment, he began to chuckle. The chuckle grew into a full-blown laugh, his entire body shaking with mirth. "Oh, my dear Lyra," he said, wiping tears of laughter from his eyes. "There's nothing to worry about. This is perfectly normal for human males." Lyra's antennae drooped in confusion. "Normal? But how? Why?" Dr. Vex patted her shoulder with one of his hands. "It's called an erection, Lyra. It's part of the human reproductive system. Sometimes it happens involuntarily, especially during sleep or when they're touched." Lyra's face flushed a deep indigo as understanding dawned. "You mean I caused this? With the sponge bath?" Dr. Vex nodded, still chuckling. "Most likely. Don't worry, it's not harmful. In fact, it's a good sign that his body is functioning normally despite his injuries." As if on cue, Ethan began to stir. His eyes fluttered open, revealing irises the color of Earth's oceans. He blinked, taking in his surroundings with confusion. Where am I?" he mumbled, his voice husky from disuse. Lyra, still mortified by her mistake, stepped forward. "You're on Nebula 7, a medical station. You were injured in a space debris incident. How are you feeling?" Ethan's eyes focused on Lyra, widening slightly at the sight of her alien features. A small smile tugged at his lips. "Like I've been hit by an asteroid, but at least the view is nice." Lyra's blush deepened at the compliment, her embarrassment mixing with an unexpected flutter in her chest. She busied herself checking his vitals, trying to regain her professional composure. "Well, Mr. Reeves, you seem to be recovering well. All your systems appear to be functioning normally," she managed to say, studiously avoiding looking at his lower body. Ethan followed her gaze, suddenly realizing his predicament. A blush crept up his neck, matching Lyra's indigo hue. "Oh, geez. I'm so sorry about that. It's just, it has a mind of its own sometimes." Dr. Vex, who had been watching the exchange with amusement, decided to intervene. "Not to worry, Mr. Reeves. We understand it's a natural process for your species." Nurse Lyra here was just a bit surprised, as she's never treated a human before. Ethan relaxed slightly, offering Lyra an apologetic smile. "I hope I didn't frighten you. I promise I'm not some kind of alien monster." Lyra couldn't help but return his smile, her professional mask slipping just a bit. "No, not frightened. Just, caught off guard. Human physiology is quite fascinating." As she continued her examination, Lyra found herself stealing glances at Ethan's face. There was something captivating about his warm eyes and easy smile. She'd always been curious about other species, but this was the first time she'd felt such an immediate connection. For his part, Ethan seemed equally intrigued by Lyra. His eyes followed her movements, taking in her graceful blue form and the gentle sway of her antennae. Despite the lingering pain from his injuries, he found himself looking forward to his recovery if it meant spending more time with this intriguing alien nurse. As Lyra finished her checks, she realized that her initial shock had given way to a burning curiosity. There was so much to learn about humans, and Ethan seemed like the perfect subject for her studies. Little did she know that this unexpected encounter would be the beginning of an adventure that would change both their lives forever. As Ethan Reeves began his recovery on the bustling medical station Nebula 7, the days turned into a whirlwind of learning and adaptation for both him and his alien nurse, Lyra. The initial shock of their first encounter had softened into a mutual curiosity, but the cultural divide between human and Zephyrian ways of life soon became apparent. Lyra, ever the diligent nurse, took it upon herself to learn more about human anatomy and behavior. She spent her breaks poring over medical texts and cultural guides stored in the station's archives. The Zephyrians were known for their meticulous nature, and Lyra was no exception. However, much of what she read about humans left her perplexed. Their biology was strange enough, but their customs and expressions baffled her even more. One day, as Lyra entered Ethan's room for his daily checkup, she found him sitting up in bed, fiddling with a small device that projected holographic images into the air. He looked up and smiled warmly at her. "Morning, Nurse Lyra," he said, his voice still slightly hoarse from his injuries but carrying a friendly tone. "You're looking as radiant as ever." Lyra paused, her antennae twitching in confusion. "Radiant? I am not emitting light," she replied earnestly. "Are you experiencing visual distortions?" Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. No. It's just an expression. It means you look, nice." Lyra tilted her head, her antennae swaying thoughtfully. "Humans use many expressions that do not align with their literal meanings," she observed. "This is confusing." Ethan grinned. "Yeah, we do have a knack for saying one thing and meaning another. It keeps things interesting." Lyra made a note on her datapad to research human idioms later. "Interesting," she repeated softly, though her tone suggested she found it more frustrating than fascinating. As the days went on, these cultural misunderstandings became a regular occurrence between them. During one session where Lyra was helping Ethan with mobility exercises, he winced slightly as he stretched his arm too far. "Careful there," Lyra said gently, steadying him with her hands. "You must not push yourself beyond your limits." Ethan smirked through the discomfort. "No pain, no gain," he quipped. Lyra froze mid-motion, her expression one of alarm. "Pain is not an acceptable outcome of medical treatment," she exclaimed. "Why would humans willingly endure pain?" Ethan laughed despite himself, realizing how strange the phrase must sound to someone unfamiliar with human sayings. "It's just a way of saying that sometimes you have to go through discomfort to achieve something worthwhile," he explained patiently. Lyra frowned but nodded slowly. "Your species has peculiar ways of motivating itself," she remarked before returning to her task with meticulous care to avoid causing him further discomfort. Their interactions weren't limited to misunderstandings about language or customs, even their diets became a point of contention. One afternoon, Ethan was served a meal that included a protein bar specifically designed for humans aboard the station. Lyra watched him eat with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Is that edible?" she asked hesitantly, pointing at the bar with one slender finger. Ethan raised an eyebrow and took another bite before replying around a mouthful of food. "It's not exactly gourmet cuisine, but it gets the job done." Lyra wrinkled her nose, an expression she had picked up from observing Ethan, and made a note on her datapad to investigate whether human dietary standards were truly so low or if this was unique to him. Despite these frequent moments of confusion or mild exasperation on Lyra's part, there was an undeniable camaraderie growing between them. Ethan found Lyra's earnestness endearing, while Lyra admired Ethan's resilience and good humor in the face of his injuries. One evening, after finishing his physical therapy session for the day, Ethan leaned back against his pillows and studied Lyra thoughtfully as she updated his medical records. "You know," he began casually, "I've been stuck here for weeks now and still don't know much about you or your people." Lyra glanced up from her datapad but hesitated before responding. Zephyrians were generally private by nature and rarely shared personal details with outsiders. "What would you like to know?" she asked cautiously. Ethan shrugged lightly, an action that still caused him some discomfort due to his injuries but which he managed nonetheless, and replied with genuine curiosity in his tone, "Anything. What's life like where you're from? What do Zephyrians do for fun? Do you guys have music or art?" Lyra considered his questions carefully before answering in measured tones. "Zephyrians value harmony above all else, both within ourselves and with our environment." She paused briefly before adding almost shyly, "We do create art occasionally, though it serves more practical purposes than purely aesthetic ones." Ethan nodded encouragingly but couldn't resist teasing her slightly, "So no wild parties or karaoke nights back home?" Lyra blinked at him blankly until he clarified what karaoke was, at which point she looked both horrified by the concept and vaguely intrigued by its potential as a form of cultural exchange between their species. Their conversation continued late into the night as they shared stories about their respective worlds, each marveling at how different yet oddly similar they could be in certain ways. By morning light filtering through artificial windows designed to mimic natural sunlight cycles aboard Nebula 7's medical bay complex, it became clear that despite, or perhaps because of, all their differences, they had formed an unlikely bond rooted not only in mutual respect but also genuine affection born out shared experiences navigating unfamiliar territory together. Little did either realize then just how much further this bond would deepen over time, or what challenges awaited them both along journey ahead. As the days passed, Nurse Lyra found herself increasingly drawn to her human patient, Ethan Reeves. His charming smile and quick wit had a way of brightening even the most challenging days on the intergalactic medical station Nebula 7. Despite her best efforts to maintain a professional distance, Lyra couldn't deny the growing connection between them. One quiet evening, as Lyra was checking Ethan's vitals, he caught her hand gently. "You know, I've been meaning to ask you something," he said, his eyes twinkling with curiosity. "What made you want to become a nurse?" Lyra's antennae twitched thoughtfully as she considered the question. "I've always been fascinated by the diversity of life in the universe," she admitted. Helping beings from all corners of the galaxy recover and heal seemed like the perfect way to satisfy that curiosity. Ethan nodded, a warm smile spreading across his face. "That's beautiful, Lyra. I can see why you're so good at your job. Your passion really shines through. Lyra felt her cheeks flush a deeper shade of blue at the compliment. She quickly busied herself with adjusting Ethan's pillows, trying to hide her reaction. And what about you, Ethan? What drove you to become an asteroid miner? Ethan's expression turned wistful. Honestly, I've always been a bit of an adrenaline junkie. The thrill of exploring uncharted space, the challenge of extracting valuable resources from hostile environments, it's addictive. Plus, the pay's not bad either, he added with a wink. As they continued to chat, Lyra found herself opening up more than she ever had with a patient before. She shared stories of her homeworld, a lush planet with floating cities and bioluminescent forests. In turn, Ethan regaled her with tales of his adventures in the asteroid belt, painting vivid pictures of the dangers and wonders he'd encountered. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Vex, who entered the room with a concerned expression on his face. "Nurse Lyra, may I speak with you for a moment?" he asked, gesturing towards the hallway. Lyra followed him out, her antennae drooping slightly with worry. "Is everything all right, Doctor?" Dr. Vex sighed, his multiple eyes blinking rapidly. "I'm afraid we've received some troubling news. It seems the debris that injured Mr. Reeves wasn't just a random accident. There are reports of increased pirate activity in the sector where his mining operation was located." Lyra gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Pirates? But that's terrible. Do you think Ethan was targeted specifically?" "It's hard to say," Dr. Vex replied, shaking his head. "But we need to be cautious. I've requested additional security for the medical station, just in case. In the meantime, I need you to keep a close eye on Mr. Reeves. Report any unusual visitors or suspicious activity immediately." Lyra nodded solemnly, her mind racing with the implications of this new information. As she re-entered Ethan's room, she struggled to keep her expression neutral, not wanting to worry him unnecessarily. Ethan, however, was more perceptive than she gave him credit for. "Everything okay?" he asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost. Do Zephyrians even have ghosts?" Lyra couldn't help but chuckle at his attempt to lighten the mood. "We have similar concepts," she replied, settling into the chair beside his bed. "Ethan, there's something I need to tell you." As gently as she could, Lyra explained the situation, watching Ethan's face carefully for his reaction. To her surprise, he remained calm, though she could see a flicker of anger in his eyes. "I had a feeling something wasn't right about that accident," he muttered, his jaw clenching. "My crew and I had stumbled upon a particularly rich vein of rare minerals just days before the attack. I bet those bastards were trying to claim it for themselves." Lyra reached out instinctively, placing her hand on Ethan's arm in a comforting gesture. "I'm so sorry, Ethan. That must have been terrifying. Are you worried about your crew?" Ethan nodded, his expression grim. "Yeah, I am. They're like family to me. I need to find a way to contact them, make sure they're safe." As they discussed potential ways to reach out to Ethan's crew without alerting the pirates, Lyra found herself admiring his determination and loyalty. Despite his own injuries, his first thought was for the safety of others. Their planning was interrupted by a commotion in the hallway. Raised voices and the sound of running feet echoed through the medical bay. Lyra rushed to the door, her heart pounding with anxiety. What she saw made her blood run cold. A group of rough-looking aliens, armed with crude but effective weapons, were making their way through the ward, checking each room as they passed. "Pirates!" Lyra quickly shut the door, turning to Ethan with panic in her eyes. "We need to hide you," she whispered urgently. "Can you move?" Ethan grimaced but nodded, slowly swinging his legs over the side of the bed. Lyra supported him as they made their way to a small supply closet in the corner of the room. It was a tight fit, but they managed to squeeze inside just as the door to the room burst open. Pressed close together in the darkness, Lyra could feel Ethan's heart racing. Or was that her own? She held her breath, praying to every cosmic deity she knew that they wouldn't be discovered. The sound of heavy footsteps and gruff voices filled the room. "Empty," one of them grunted. "The human's not here." "Keep searching," another voice commanded. "He can't have gone far in his condition." As the pirates moved on to the next room, Lyra and Ethan remained frozen in place, hardly daring to breathe. In that moment of shared danger, something shifted between them. The connection they'd been building over the past weeks crystallized into something deeper, more profound. Ethan's arm tightened around Lyra's waist, pulling her closer. She could feel the warmth of his breath on her neck, sending shivers down her spine despite the gravity of their situation. "Lyra," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "If we make it out of this, there's something I need to tell you." She turned her head slightly, meeting his intense gaze in the dim light filtering through the cracks of the closet door. "What is it?" she breathed. Before Ethan could respond, the sound of alarms blaring throughout the station cut through the tension. The station's security forces had finally been alerted to the intruders. As chaos erupted outside their hiding place, Lyra and Ethan exchanged a look of determination. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The unexpected bond forged between a human and an alien nurse in the most unlikely of circumstances was about to be tested in ways neither of them could have imagined. The medical station Nebula 7 was no stranger to chaos, but the events of recent days had brought an unusual level of tension. Ethan Reeves, now fully aware of the pirate threat that had caused his injuries, was restless. His recovery was progressing well under Lyra's care, but his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't stop thinking about his crew and the asteroid mining operation he had left behind. Lyra, too, felt the weight of the situation. Though she tried to focus on her duties, her thoughts often drifted to Ethan's plight. Their bond had grown stronger since their first awkward encounter, and she couldn't help but feel a deep responsibility for his well-being, not just physically but emotionally as well. One evening, as Lyra entered Ethan's room for his nightly checkup, she found him pacing back and forth, his movements still slightly stiff from his injuries. His face was set in a grim expression, and his hands were clenched into fists at his sides. "You shouldn't be out of bed," Lyra said gently, though her voice carried a note of concern. Ethan stopped and turned to her, his blue eyes blazing with frustration. "I can't just sit here anymore, Lyra," he said, his voice tight with emotion. "My crew could be in danger. Those pirates could be targeting them right now, and I'm stuck here doing nothing." Lyra stepped closer to him, her antennae twitching sympathetically. "I understand how you feel," she said softly. "But rushing into action before you're fully healed won't help anyone. You need to be strong if you're going to face whatever's out there." Ethan sighed heavily and ran a hand through his dark hair. "You're right," he admitted reluctantly. "But it doesn't make this any easier." There was a moment of silence between them before Lyra spoke again. "Ethan, what if we found a way to contact your crew? Maybe we could warn them about the pirates or at least find out if they're safe." Ethan's eyes lit up with hope at her suggestion. "You'd help me do that?" he asked, his voice filled with gratitude and disbelief. Lyra nodded firmly. "Of course. You're not just my patient, you're my friend." Her words seemed to have a calming effect on Ethan, and he gave her a small smile. "Thank you, Lyra," he said sincerely. "I don't know what I'd do without you." The two of them spent the next few hours devising a plan to reach Ethan's crew without drawing attention from the pirates or violating station protocols. Lyra used her access to the medical station's communication systems to locate an old emergency transmitter that could send a signal directly to Ethan's mining ship without routing through official channels. It was risky. If anyone discovered what they were doing, they could both face serious consequences, but neither of them hesitated. As they worked together in the dimly lit room, their proximity only intensified the unspoken connection between them. Lyra couldn't help but notice how focused and determined Ethan looked as he explained the technical details of the transmitter to her. For his part, Ethan found himself drawn to Lyra's calm intelligence and unwavering support. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they managed to send out a coded message containing a warning about the pirates and a request for a status update from Ethan's crew. Now all they could do was wait. The following day brought both relief and new challenges when a response came through from one of Ethan's crewmates, a woman named Tessa who had taken command in his absence. Tessa reported that while the crew was safe for now, they had been forced to abandon their mining operation due to increased pirate activity in the area. Ethan's relief at hearing that his crew was alive quickly gave way to anger as he read Tessa's message aloud to Lyra. "We've lost everything we worked for, all because those damn pirates decided they wanted what wasn't theirs." Lyra placed a comforting hand on Ethan's shoulder as he sat slumped in his chair, staring at the screen with a mix of frustration and helplessness. "We'll figure this out," she said firmly. "There has to be a way to stop them." Ethan looked up at her with renewed determination in his eyes. "You're right," he said slowly. "And I think I know how." He went on to explain his plan, using Nebula 7's resources and technology alongside his own knowledge of mining operations and pirate tactics. He believed they could set a trap for the pirates, one that would not only protect other miners in the sector but also reclaim what had been stolen from him and his crew. Lyra listened intently as Ethan outlined his idea, her admiration for him growing with every word. She knew it wouldn't be easy, there were countless risks involved, but she also knew that if anyone could pull it off, it was Ethan. "I'm with you," she said when he finished speaking. "Whatever you need me to do." Ethan smiled at her, a genuine smile that reached his eyes, and took her hand in his own. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I couldn't do this without you." As they began preparing for their daring mission together, gathering allies from among Nebula 7 staff and securing permission from station authorities, they both felt an unshakable sense of purpose driving them forward. For Ethan Reeves and Nurse Lyra of Zephyrian descent, this was more than just a fight against pirates, it was a fight for justice, for survival, and perhaps most importantly, for each other. This part sets up an emotional turning point where both characters take active steps toward resolving external conflicts while deepening their bond further through mutual trust and shared purpose. As the sun dipped below the horizon of Nebula 7, casting a warm glow across the medical station, Ethan Reeves and Nurse Lyra prepared for the next phase of their plan. The tension in the air was palpable, but so was the determination that had brought them together. They had spent countless hours strategizing, gathering support from fellow staff members, and ensuring that their plan to confront the pirates was solid. Gathering allies. Ethan knew that they couldn't take on the pirates alone. They needed allies, people who understood the risks and were willing to fight alongside them. Lyra had reached out to other medical personnel and even some of the security teams stationed at Nebula 7. To Ethan's surprise, many were eager to help, inspired by the courage he and Lyra had shown. "Tonight, we meet in the conference room," Lyra said as she adjusted her uniform, her antennae twitching with excitement. "We'll lay out our plan and see who's willing to join us." Ethan nodded, his heart racing with anticipation. "I can't believe we're actually doing this," he said, a mix of fear and exhilaration coursing through him. "It feels surreal." Lyra smiled reassuringly. "We're doing it together. That's what matters." As they made their way to the conference room, Ethan felt a sense of purpose wash over him. He was no longer just a patient recovering from injuries, he was a soldier ready to fight for his crew and his future. The meeting. When they arrived at the conference room, Ethan was greeted by a diverse group of individuals, doctors, nurses, security personnel, and even a few engineers who had worked on the asteroid mining operations. Each face reflected a mix of determination and concern. "Thank you all for coming," Ethan began, his voice steady despite the nervous energy buzzing in the room. "As many of you know, there has been an increase in pirate activity in our sector. They've targeted my crew and our mining operations. We can't let them continue to wreak havoc on innocent lives." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Lyra stood beside him, her presence grounding him as he spoke. "I propose we set a trap for these pirates," Ethan continued. We can use Nebula 7's resources to create a decoy operation that will lure them in while we ambush them. Dr. Vex, an Andromedian with 4 arms and an impressive stature, raised an eyebrow. This is a risky plan, Sergeant Reeves. What makes you think it will work? Ethan met his gaze with unwavering confidence. Because we have something they don't, unity and determination. We're not just fighting for ourselves, we're fighting for everyone who's been affected by their greed. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed his words. Slowly but surely, hands began to rise in support of Ethan's plan. Preparing for battle. Over the next few days, preparations were in full swing. The team worked tirelessly to gather supplies, set up communication lines, and coordinate their efforts with other nearby stations that had also been targeted by pirates. Lyra took charge of medical logistics, ensuring that they would have everything needed to treat any injuries sustained during the confrontation. She worked alongside Dr. Vex, who provided invaluable insight into alien physiology and combat medicine. Ethan spent hours training with security personnel, honing his skills and learning how to work as part of a team rather than as an isolated individual. He was impressed by how quickly everyone adapted to their roles. It was clear that they were all committed to making this operation a success. As they trained together under the watchful eye of experienced soldiers, Ethan felt a sense of camaraderie blossom among them, a bond forged through shared purpose and mutual respect. The night before their planned operation was filled with nervous energy. Ethan found himself unable to sleep as he paced his quarters, replaying every detail of their plan in his mind. Just then, there was a soft knock on his door. It was Lyra. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. "Of course," he replied, opening the door wider for her. She stepped inside, her emerald skin glowing softly under the dim lights. "I thought you might need some company," she said with a gentle smile. Ethan chuckled nervously as he ran a hand through his hair. "I could use all the company I can get right now." Lyra moved closer, her presence calming him as she leaned against the wall beside him. "You've done an incredible job rallying everyone together," she said sincerely. "I'm proud of you." His heart swelled at her words, they meant more than he could express. "I couldn't have done it without you," he admitted quietly. Lyra looked up at him with those captivating eyes that seemed to hold galaxies within them. "We're in this together," she said softly before hesitating for just a moment before adding, "no matter what happens tomorrow." Ethan nodded solemnly, he understood the weight of those words all too well. They had both come so far since their first encounter, the shock and embarrassment had transformed into something deeper, something worth fighting for. The ambush. The following day dawned bright but tense as they executed their plan with precision and determination. The decoy operation was set up on one of the nearby asteroids, an abandoned mining site that would serve as bait for the pirates. As Ethan watched from Nebula 7's command center alongside Lyra and Dr. Vex, adrenaline coursed through his veins like wildfire. "Here they come," one of the security officers shouted as pirate ships appeared on their scanners, a swarm of menacing vessels descending toward their target. "Stand by," Dr. Vex commanded as everyone held their breath in anticipation. Once the pirates engaged with the decoy operation and began boarding it under false pretenses of easy prey, Ethan signaled for their forces to move into position. "Now," he shouted as they launched their ambush, security personnel pouring out from hidden positions around the asteroid like shadows emerging from darkness. The ensuing battle was chaotic but exhilarating. Blaster fire lit up space like fireworks against a backdrop of stars as both sides clashed fiercely. A moment of truth. In the midst of combat chaos, Ethan spotted one pirate attempting to escape through an emergency hatch on one side of the asteroid base, a chance he couldn't let slip away. With determination fueling him forward, he sprinted toward where he saw movement while dodging blaster fire from other pirates still engaged in battle with security forces behind him. Just as he reached the hatchway entrance, his heart pounding fiercely in his chest, he found himself face to face with one particularly burly pirate who seemed intent on escaping at any cost. Not so fast. Ethan shouted defiantly before lunging forward to tackle him down just as blaster bolts flew overhead, a split-second decision that could change everything. The two struggled briefly before Ethan managed to gain control over his opponent, pinning him down against cold metal flooring while keeping his blaster trained firmly on him. "Call off your crew," Ethan demanded fiercely, adrenaline coursing through him like electricity sparking every nerve ending alive within him. The pirate laughed mockingly even as he struggled beneath Ethan's grip, his defiance only fueling Ethan's resolve further until finally. Victory! With one final surge of strength fueled by righteous fury over everything these pirates had done, their greed costing lives, Ethan subdued him completely while signaling for backup from nearby security forces who quickly arrived on scene to assist in detaining additional pirates still lingering around trying desperately escape capture amidst chaos unfolding around them. After what felt like hours but was likely only minutes, the battle finally subsided into silence broken only by distant alarms ringing out across Nebula 7 signaling victory over those who sought prey among innocent miners. Breathless yet exhilarated, Ethan stood victorious alongside Lyra who rushed toward him eyes shining bright with pride and relief. "We did it!" she exclaimed joyfully throwing her arms around him tightly while laughter bubbled forth uncontrollably between them both. "Yes, we did!" He echoed back feeling more alive than ever before knowing that together, they had faced down danger and emerged stronger than ever. As cheers erupted throughout Command Center celebrating hard-won victory, it became clear this wasn't just about defeating pirates anymore, it was about forging bonds stronger than steel amidst adversity faced together. And so began new chapter-filled hope and promise ahead, a future where humans and aliens alike could stand united against threats looming large across galaxy.